today we are honored to have two guest trainers from Malaysia. One is from University of Technology Malaysia, and the other one is Monash Australia Malaysian campus, Dr. Imtiaz Sifat. First of all, I would like to introduce Professor Madhya Dr. Farzana Kokop from University of Technology Malaysia. Being a well-known expert in literature review, she has authored and co-authored several books which have been published by reputed publishers like Emerald, IGI Global, and Pearson. She is the author of widely recognized book, Crafting Literature Review, a guide for doctoral students. She is also a prolific guest writer. As the contribution to research and publications, she awards a faculty award for research, highly commended award, and so on. She teaches research skills related courses at the doctoral level and conducts workshops on various topics related to literature review to build students' ability in writing effectively. Over to you, Dr. Farzana Kokop. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Mohsin, I can hear you. So you want me to share my slide?
Yes, you can share.
Okay. Is it visible? You can see it?
Yes. It's visible.
If any point of time my sound is not okay or any problem, please let me know. Okay. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to the Pakistani participant in Malaysia. This is now 12 p.m. So I think in Pakistan it is now 9 a.m. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Mohsin for having me here today and also to share the virtual space with Dr. Imtiaz Sifat. Well, a little bit about me. I am associate professor at Azman Hashim International Business School, University of Technology Malaysia. My research focus is green marketing. Well, I don't like to say myself as a scholar. I mean, very much like, specialized in research skills or something. What I like to say, I'm an advanced learner. Why I'm advanced learner? Because I gone through the experience. I did my doctorate, and of course, I learned doing my research. And then also at the moment, now I'm supervising doctoral students, DB and PhD. I also conduct workshops about research skills courses. I write, I actively review papers for reputed journal articles. I'm also editorial board members for several journals. So accumulating all those experience, I like to share my knowledge with the new researchers in the hope that it can contribute to their understanding and help them to understand the craft better. But well, again, I will say that I am not an expert per se, but I am an advanced learner. Okay, so this is the place I work. This is one of the 5 research universities in Malaysia. Okay, and these are a little bit of my editorial board membership. So mostly I am affiliated with Emerald Journals. Happens to be anyone write case, then Emerald Emerging Case Studies. I am also one of the associate editors in EMCS. And these are some profile. If anyone want to know about my research and publication, you can go through any of these profile like Google Scholar, ResearchGate, Publons, and my university faculty webpage. Well, so let's start with our today's topic about literature review. I do not know how much I can benefit you, but definitely, I would love to hear from you if you have any questions at the end of the session. But as I discussed with Dr. Mohsin earlier, that I cannot sit more than 1 hour. So I will try to finish my discussion before 1 hour. So you will have maybe 5-7 minutes to, ask many questions. So all of us know that, this research skill courses a little bit overwhelming, and especially literature review. Why it is overwhelming? There are several reasons. First of all, it is very subjective in nature. There is no particular book or no particular journal you will find they say that you must do it in this way. So this is very subjective. No specific structure is available because, different university may have their different preference, different fields, different subjects, different supervisor, so it can have different structure, and it's not so structured like, some research software, PLS, AMOS, it's not like that either. And in the literature and in the internet, you will find a lot of different information. So sometimes it also can make you overwhelming. And as you know that, supervisor to supervisor, examiners to examiners, reviewers to reviewers, the expectations can vary greatly. It can vary greatly. Even based on the field, like, science and social science, how they review the literature may be different than social science researchers. Even within social science researchers, like my field, marketing or management, how we review the papers or, literature may be different than you guys, what you're doing, So what my point of view is that though it is overwhelming, though it is subjective, though it can vary greatly, but there are some common rules, common expectations that any researcher, anyone in the world, they need to follow or they need to understand. Okay, so what is all about it? So of course you can read many books, many articles about the definition, but one definition that is very close to my heart, and I think it gives very wide range of understanding. It's very, very informative even. So I actually broken down this definition into pieces for your easy understanding. It is taken from Cooper. Cooper's, this book is very, very, useful and well-renowned. I will give you some list of recommended books, literature review at the end of my presentation. So if anyone want to, have those books, maybe you can just buy from Amazon, or you can maybe borrow from your online library or so whatever. So I will show you certain very specific 3-4 books recommendation at the end of my presentation today. So this is one of my favorite books. According to Cooper, said, literature reviews can attempt to integrate what others have done and said, to criticize previous scholarly works, to build bridges between related topics, areas, and or to identify the central issues in a field. So if we, try to make it into pieces, so we understand that it is integrating what is being said. That means what other researchers have done. So it is integrating those information. So how we do that? We summarize, criticize. So when we're reading or reviewing literature, it's not all about just reading passively. We also need to know to be critical in reading and writing. Unless you are critical in reading and writing, you will not be able to bring this knowledge to the advanced level, because you need to know how to find the research gap, or you need to know how to see a bigger picture. You need to know also a little bit of, to think properly that what are the weaknesses of this literature or what are the strengths. So those things also you need to know, and I will give you a little bit guidance on that today. Build bridges. This is actually we synthesize the piece of knowledge that we get after reading a lot of literature, and identify. So that is actually gap identification. So based on this definition, we can say, to some extent that what literature review actually does for us is summarize. We need to summarize, we need to critically read and write, we need to synthesize, and we need to identify the gap. Okay, let's move on. So this is one, a newspaper cutting I just taken from yesterday. So this is something like, if you read properly, it's written like the current 2-week lockdown, which is due to end on Monday, has seen a reduction in the number of positive COVID-19 cases, blah, blah, blah. Is it a literature review? Of course not. This is like reporting facts or sharing information without reviewing literature. So this is actually just reporting facts, okay? This one is literature review. So this is one research article, and what they have done, they read some other articles and they summarize, they synthesize, and then they put their own thoughts. So just to show you a little bit of difference and lot to say you that, you know, what literature review is not. So literature review is not merely reporting facts like this one. So when you want to review literature, keep it in your mind that don't be just like, you know, parrot that you're just delivering, you know, what other people have said, or just, you know, reporting the facts and figures. It has to be shows that it is a literature review. So what you can do to make it a proper literature review. So I'll come to that discussion a little bit later. So a quick glance at the types of review we can have. There can be also plenty, but these three are basic classification. So narrative review or traditional review. It is also some authors they call traditional review. We have systematic literature review. We have meta-analysis. So what is narrative review? Narrative review is traditionally what we do, regardless of your discipline, regardless of your subject matters. We usually do narrative review, and it has a wider scope, and it is actually, of course, very effective as well. And we synthesize here, summarize, we criticize, and all those things we do in narrative review, okay? Today, my discussion will be actually narrative review, because this is common for anyone. Anyone else can do that. Anyone else can utilize that. Systematic literature review is more systematic in manners, and how it differs. There are some differentiating points. First of all, in systematic literature review, we have, like, you know, exclusion and inclusion criteria when you are collecting the sources. And then we also have here multiple reviewers involved to check whether what you're reviewing, how you're reviewing, it has biasness or not. And also the another important thing, it deals with very specific question. Narrative review doesn't deal with very specific narrow question, but SLR, we always start with a very specific question, and along the way we try to answer that question. Okay, meta-analysis a little bit different. In meta-analysis, actually, we use statistical a little bit of technique. You can see here that basically we see that, you know, researchers gather findings from several studies on a particular topic and analyze them using a statistical procedure, develop a common matrix. So basically effect size. I never done meta-analysis in my life, but I did SLR and narrative review definitely. So if anyone is interested to know more about how systematic literature review it looks like, you can read this article. This is available in ResearchGate. So all steps are clearly explained with diagram. So it can be a little bit eye-opener for you, for those who are interested to know about SLR. Okay. Some relevant aspects that I told you that what make a literature review effective, right? So those are the things all of us we need to know. So one of the things is that we need to know selection of documents, record keeping and mapping your ideas, critical reading and critical writing, identifying the reader's research gap, and writing style. So there can be many, many more, definitely. I'm not saying these are all, but I must say these are basic. If at least you must know this much, at least, okay, it can be your starting point to understand how you can write an effective literature review. So I'm going to touch on all those things a little bit, of course, not a great extent, but to some extent to just give you an eye-opener. So this workshop is like eye-opener. Of course, it's not enough to just to sit workshops. For my advice for all students or all new researchers, please read. The key is to learn is to read and to write. Unless you read and write, you know, nobody can develop you're better. Okay, so before I proceed to the selection, when we search articles, there can be many more ways. And today we will have another guest speaker after me. I believe he will cover those things for you guys more clearly. So I just want to highlight to specific ways that any novice researcher, if you don't have access to online good journal database, or if you don't have, lot of experiences, so anyone can follow these two ways. First, keyword search. So when you use keyword, you can use also, different synonymous words, especially when you do not have vast literature. So I give you an example. Let's say I'm working on customer loyalty, and then I can use synonymous word customer retention, okay, to get wider range of the sources, the literature. So this is one thing. And another is use with and without context. Like if I want to examine a customer's loyalty in mobile phone service context in Malaysia, so the research context here, mobile phone and Malaysia, country context as well as the industry context. So in that case, I can just type, for example, loyalty, customer loyalty, or I can write also customer loyalty in telco industry, or I can also write customer loyalty in telco industry in Malaysia. So the more you will use the, the context, it will be narrowed down your search. So for me, I think you can do everything actually, as long you get your required information. Another is search articles from the key reference articles reference list. So this is also very useful, very, very useful, because first of all, you must read scholarly articles. Those are published in scholarly journals. So what do I mean by scholarly? First of all, it has to be peer reviewed. What is peer reviewed? It is blind review, and this review process should include at least 2 reviewers. An author should not know the reviewer, reviewer should not know the author. This is first criteria to be scholarly. Second of all, it has to be indexed in good database. I mean, good indexing bodies like Scopus or ISI. So other indexing bodies also good. I'm not saying bad, but widely recognized basically at the moment is Scopus and ISI. And it is some universities, they're more, demanding. They may ask you to read, of course, impact factors, but well, that is very specific, not all universities. So the Scopus and ISI indexing is actually acceptable as there are scholarly journals or database. So what do we do when anyone, good scholar, they want to write, usually they also pick up those kind of platform, that is indexed in Scopus or ISI. So once you submit or publish in those kind of journal, it is preferably, and it happens that the journal, this article also cite scholarly journals. So let's say I publish in one journal that is indexed in Scopus and ISI, and then the papers I cite in my article, I also take care of the quality of those papers. That also published in good platform. Because why? When I submit my paper for revision, the reviewers also check all those things, whether the sources are actually, reputed or non-reputed. What does it mean? Reputed means scholarly, ISI Scopus index, or it is coming from conference proceedings, it is coming from just, maybe, Google Scholar or whatever. So those are the things. So once you read a good journal articles, you will find the list of reference given in that article. They have plenty relevant articles that are published in good platform. So you can just go through and you can see which articles you like, you think related to your topic, maybe 3, then you download those 3 and do the same. Again, those 3 are journals articles. You go to the reference list and figure it out what articles you think the best suit for your subject matter or your topic. Then you try to download. So in this way, without having any difficulties, you can actually download plenty of, relevant scholarly journal articles. Okay. One example, when you're using keyword search, so I just giving one example, that customer loyalty, customer retention, even customer switching, because switching, many authors, they consider it is the, mirror opposite of loyalty. So when you use switching, it also can give you the understanding of the, mirror image of loyalty. So in this way, actually many scholars, they do not like the use of Google Scholar. For me, I'm not that rigid. For me, I just feel that who are novice researcher and who actually doesn't have access to good databases, sometimes library doesn't subscribe due to the lot of money they have to pay, you can use, but make sure that one thing you should consider that Google Scholar, sometimes authors, they upload unpublished papers version. So before they publish that version. So that is the thing danger. So you must try to see the right side, whatever, available, but read that article that is published form. Otherwise, you can get the wrong version, wrong information even. Or else you can get the information from Google Scholar and then you use your online database to download that particular published article. Okay. This is how it looks like. As I said, right side, you can see the available articles appears. So it is actually showing me that, first, second, third, 3 articles available online, and these are PDF form. So you have to check that whether those are published form or not. So when I said that you can also see journal articles key reference list. So let's say this is one journal article, and then this journal article has the key reference list, and you can see that the journals appearing in this particular published paper, those are all reputed. So you can just see which one you think suitable for you, and then you can download those 3, 4, 2, and then you can again look at the reference list for those journals. Okay, so these are 2 very effective way, and possibly the other guest speaker will cover many more. Well, now come back to the selection of documents or sources. So we have actually, it is Sanders et al. I taken from Sanders et al. This is another my very favorite book. This book is not about literature review per se, but this is a methodology book. I give you also the reference in my last slide. Sanders et al. Actually, they written a very, very useful book, and that they cover all aspects of a methodology. So from them, I took this information that anyone interested, you can read Sanders et al. Actually. So we have primary sources, we have secondary sources. So what is primary sources? Those are very difficult to obtain. It's not available online all the time. So it includes report, unpublished thesis, conference proceeding, working papers, etc. And many, they call it as gray literature. What is secondary source? It's easy to locate, available, published online. So those are we call secondary sources, okay, like books, journals, newspapers, any other information that is published and available. So some discipline, I do not know about yours, some discipline, they may like you to have more on secondary sources than the primary sources. Why? Because some discipline, the experts, they believe that, secondary sources go through more rigorous process, because before you get published, you have to go for revision, you have to check other people's comment and things like that. But primary source is actually your something that do not go through the revision process or something like that. But again, I have no much comment on that, because follow your own discipline. What your discipline, your supervisors, your lecturers, they advise you, just follow that. Well, so once you have collection of your database and your sources and your all those literature downloaded, you start reading. So next step is actually how you can record it. So keep recording those materials is sometimes daunting task, because some discipline, some topic, we have plenty of literature and then we have to read plenty of articles. I'm not saying all, but it depends on your discipline, it depends on the topic, and it depends on your maybe requirement of university. So in my discipline, marketing or similar management or whatever, on those discipline, basically we have to read a lot, and we have to see the available articles that actually in the online or hard copies form. So what happened? Let's say I read 500 articles about my own topic, for example, or 200 even. So what happening? You can be actually easily lost You can be easily lost, drowned in the ocean by all those information, and it will be difficult for you to figure it out what I read from where. So in this regard, I want to add one more thing. I know many scholars, my colleagues, my students, they like to use like, NVivo, EndNote, Mendeley. Please use that, no problem at all. But those things actually help you to sort out and help you to maybe figure it out. Let's say, for example, I use NVivo for this purpose before, just to have understanding. So you write loyalty, and it will give you the all articles name, and it will appear that that they talk about loyalty. So you know that these articles they talk about loyalty phenomenon, and then you can read more about that article. But I'm not talking about that. There is no such thing that if you use Mendel you cannot use that. It's not mutually exclusive. You can use both. So what I was trying to tell you, that when you read, our mind has to work. If you are not actively engaged in reading, if you are not actively thinking what you're reading, you will never be able to write a good or effective literature review. So therefore, when we engage our mind and our thought process when we're reading, so you also can have several mapping to figure it out what you read, to have some directions to guide your head, to have some information that, okay, I read this, I can see the link, and maybe it can have some, relationship, this kind of thing. So Hart given few good options for this kind of mapping. Hart said that you can have relationship map, you can have concept map, and another thing is my favorite, and this is actually most of the scholars, they love it, and I'm sure you also read it some articles, maybe not consciously, but there are. So how it looks like, this relationship map taken from Hart. So this map is showing that based on article review that you can come up with this kind of mind mapping, your own map. This is your own map to understand the overall idea. Well, many students, they love it. Some, they also feel it is not so easy. So I leave it upon you guys. This is concept mapping, how it looks like. So every time you read one article, you can have this kind of, circle and your own mapping that, okay. One of my students did that, PhD student, he already graduated. So he did that. He have a big, huge paper, and whenever he read one article, he do that. So again, my other students, they didn't like it. So it depends on your comfort zone, your preference, because who want to read it again? You yourself. So do what you feel effective for you. For me, what I love, and my all students, I advise them to do, that is summary record sheet or summary table. Many people, they call it also, literature mapping, whatever it is, whatever you want to name it is up to you, it doesn't matter much. But the issue is you can summarize or, just keep all information in one Excel file or in Word file, whatever it is. So many of my students, they do it in Excel file because they have more options to add on more columns and you more rows. So this one, like, you can have your article code, meaning to say if you're reading article for example, customer loyalty, you can code it CL1, CL2, CL3. You're reading, for example, customer satisfaction, you can code it like CS1, CS2, whatever is up to you. And then just write down the all information that you need for that particular articles. And you can just pick up the research objective or question. Usually published paper, they don't give both, they give either question or objective. Both comes only basically in project or thesis, this kind of places. And you can just briefly write down methodology, what methodology that particular article used. Very quickly, like if it is quantitative, you can write hypothesis and the supported, not supported. And you can have more column based on your preference, like you can have what other variables that particular study has studied. Or some of my students, they're more clever, they did like future research direction, they have a column for that. So they want to see later on which article they emphasize what to do in the future. So in this way, you can have it, this article mapping actually for yourself, first of all. So do it as precise as you can. So when you read one time, you put it in this table form, and then later on, without reading the whole article, you can just glance through this table, which one you'll want to read, then you go to that particular article and you can just read through that article again. So in this way, usually students, they do not lose, they are not lost, you know. So for my students, I always suggest them to do it. And of course, it's up to you whether you want to do it or not. It's just I'm sharing some tips and tricks. So now it's up to you how much you want to follow or not. So this is one example taken from one of my summary table a long time before though. So you can see here that, you know, the authors and the, you know, the quote, it starts with article code, and then the articles, that particular information, then the very precisely the methodology. So you can see that this methodology very specifically written, is not copy pasting from abstract, definitely. So the, you know, the number of sample size, the sampling technique used, then which country, these are the things there. And then it has also the research objective, and then the findings, and then, you know, you can see there all those things, the other variables used. So this is one example of what I have done before about compulsive buying tendency. So this is, that's why it is coming the code CB1. So this is something that also you can see it in actually other journal articles, but journal articles, they do not give this kind of table at all. So that table for yourself. Now, what you want to put in your write-up, it depends on you. If you know you want to show just dimensionality, like this paper, you can just take that part and put it in your writing, whether it is for your thesis, whether it is for your journal articles, writing, whatever, you can do that. So this is another one also showing the dimensionality. Certain variable, it deals with dimension. So then dimension become one huge matter, but not for all, definitely. For you, it can be different thing. It can be functionality. It can be, you know, maybe definitions or whatever. You can make it based on your preference and your focus. Well, next is, you know, as I said, it's not enough to just read passively. We also need to read actively by engaging our thought process. So engaging meaning, you know, you have, when you're reading and it is published, do not think that it is flawless. So because, you know, we are reading to learn. So we are reading anything to learn. So you are spending sometimes few minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, it has to be like benefiting you. So therefore, you know, when we even buy a product or service, we pay money, and then we see, we observe whether that fulfill the purpose or not. So same goes here. You're spending 2 hours, you're spending 3 hours to reading something. So you need to make sure that, you know, that things you are reading, it is actually fulfilling the purpose. So that's how we become critical when we read. So critical does not mean that you have to be negative or nasty or just find a negative side. It's about actually when we read something, we try to understand that whether the information I'm reading, it is reliable. Is it benefiting me? Is it contributing? If it is contributing, then quit and read. Yeah. So basically 3 things you can just focus on when you want to be critical in reading and writing. First, what are the strength and weakness? What you're reading, so what are the strength of that particular articles or particular, you know, information you're reading, and what are the weaknesses? Also, you can try to understand that, is it adding any new knowledge to my understanding? Is it reliable? Now, how I will understand? Let's look at some example. This one, if you read 1 minute or a few seconds, it is actually, I give some examples sometimes coming from when I review articles from there, because I believe a lot of things to learn when you review article. Either you will learn good thing, or you will learn something that they did wrongly, and you should not do that. So that's why I do not put here the title or author name, nothing. So this is just taking certain part of that article that I believe that we can learn something, either a strength or weakness. So this article, they're saying, according to Lin et al., green cosmetics is defined as being a multifaceted construct for the preservation of the environment, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then in bracket, again, they put here H.S. Su et al. 2017. Then they written again, in addition, Sobra and Vogella indicate that green cosmetics are also considered natural cosmetics, blah, blah, blah. Then they said, it is also important to note that green and organic cosmetics should not be mistaken for each other. And then they give an explanation and difference between green cosmetic and organic cosmetic. So if we start with the strength, so when I give an example, if it is my class, I ask my students to respond, but it is just webinar, so I'm not asking any of you to respond. But when I ask you to read, think, okay, engage in thinking process. Just don't just sit and, lean in the couch. Try to engage in thought process. So strength number 1, topic is interesting, at least to me. Strength number 2, they differentiated between those two phenomena. One is organic cosmetics, another is green cosmetics. Strength number 3, they given some information based on past studies. So, okay, so these are strength. Weakness, this is a little bit messy write-up. Why? Because they do not know how to write academically. I give you some clue here. They started with according to Lin et al., and then they end up with Su et al. 2017. The question is which author they actually followed. Don't do like this. And the second thing is that you see they written here started with some inverted comma, but they didn't end it up. They written that green cosmetics is a construct, but it's not a construct, it's a phenomenon. So what happened is that it has some strength, but it also has some weaknesses. Come to the second example. So if we read this one, the results show that social norm, perceived behavioral control, ecological motive, and environmental knowledge impact the consumer's attitude towards green cosmetics. Also, consumers' involvement strengthens the positive relationship between attitude and purchase intention. However, the role of health consciousness was non-significant. The findings suggest that practitioners should try to enhance the consumer's knowledge and blah, blah, blah. So our second question was whether it is contributing to the knowledge or not. The answer is yes. This particular write-up, it is contributing to the knowledge in terms of practitioners' literature, because they are saying that what the practitioners they can do. So your contribution can be from different contribution, like contribution to the theory, contribution to the practice, contribution to the policymakers, or it can be any kind of contribution to your knowledge. Let's say one phenomenon, loyalty in Malaysian perspective, but you don't know about Ethiopia. So when you read article that is published by Ethiopian authors, so now, okay, how it looks like in Ethiopian market. So it is contributing to your knowledge. But let's say if you're reading one article and it is not contributing to your knowledge to any aspect, neither in theory, nor in practice, nor in country context, nor in product or service context, nor in methodology, nothing, then this is actually not a good paper. So as scholars, we need to all the time see how we are benefiting from reading this particular piece of paper and in which aspect. That is also part of your critical thinking. Now, the third question that I said, is it reliable? So read together. Tourism plays a significant role for the economy of British Columbia. In 2012, the tourism industry generated $13.5 billion in revenue, blah, blah, blah. So you can see here, this particular write-up, it has a lot of facts and figures, which is very good. And facts and figures actually creates our confidence and creates the credibility, of course. However, this is not a reliable information. If you think properly, maybe you understand already, they don't have any citation. When you mention any facts and figures, you must give some references saying that it is not coming from your head. It is coming from one source that they investigated and they found that. So this is another thing, that whether the piece of papers, this knowledge is, reliable or not. Well, so the another thing, when we are reviewing the literature, we need to know about gap because it is called deficiency in the literature. So why we need to know about deficiency in the literature? Because unless you know what is the deficiency, where is the loophole, you cannot fill up that loophole. And then whatever you're doing, it is not worthy. So therefore, we need to know where is that loophole, where is the deficiency. As a researcher, we try to actually, fulfill that particular, address that particular, gap or the deficiency in the literature. That's how we contribute. So therefore, whatever, it doesn't matter in a specific discipline, regardless of discipline, regardless of, university requirement. This is something that everybody, we need to understand that if you're not filling any gap, you're not contributing. That gap doesn't mean it has to be huge. It can be anything, small to big or moderate. We read one write-up again together. Despite that, marketing has well established the pervasiveness of the moderating effect of brand consumption. Its effect in the hotel industry and its dynamic influence in different consumption settings is still elusive. To fill this gap, this study aims to confirm the moderating role of the social visibility of hotel consumption. We do so by examining the relation between image and functional congruities and how they affect attitude towards brand, blah, blah, blah. The question is this gap really properly explained? So my question as a reviewer, so what? Does this statement justify the inclusion of the price level and social desirability in the model? The discussion started with brand consumption, followed by the discussion on image and functional congruity. So the gaps mentioned are not related either. So I showed you one bad example. Now we see one good example, and this is really a good one. So if we read together, we can see that there is a growing recognition of customer satisfaction as a critical construct in marketing in general and consumer behavior in particular. As a result, substantial research interest has been generated in the area of consumer satisfaction, expectations, attitude, intention, result-seeking activities, complaining behavior, blah, blah, blah. However, there is a dearth of research examining what happens to customers after they have switched with regard to satisfaction loyalty. An understanding of how these consumers group differ in their attitude and behavior towards the firm provide crucial insights. So if we read carefully, actually, it is written very nicely. First, this author, they written what they know from the literature on the topic. So that is actually the first thing you should do before you jump to the gap. So what we know, you have to summarize first, because if you say nobody have done it, where is the evidence? Nobody have done it. So first of all, you need to give the evidence that, okay, we know this, but we don't know this one. Second of all, it shows your credibility as an author that, yeah, I'm coming up with this gap after summarizing and synthesizing past study. It's not that all of a sudden I'm jumping and saying that, okay, hey, nobody have done it. So the question can be nobody done, doesn't matter. Maybe it was not needed. Maybe it was not important. So therefore, nobody have done it. So there's a way of explaining the gap. So first, you inform your reader what we know from the literature on the topic. And then you say, however, nevertheless, nonetheless, what the things they didn't do yet, we don't know yet. And then explain why we need to do it. So these are the few common rules that, when you write, if you follow, it will be really an academic writing or really effective literature review. Okay, if you want to know more about how to identify and write the research gap, I have one webinar for this, YouTube online available from ResearchBiz. Dr. Faizanal invited me for this one. You can actually Google it. And you can get it. It is more explanatory in nature. That discussion may be more than 30 minutes or maybe 25 minutes only about research gap. So you can just, listen it there. Another thing I would like to touch on it, that academic writing style, because it's not all about content, it also how you deliver the content. So sometimes it happens that, we have good idea and we have the good understanding on the topic or phenomenon, but we do not know how to write it academically. So academic writing is a huge area. There are a lot of books you will find in the market, and it differs, maybe university even, there are expectations. But what I'm just showing here, these are very basic tips for academic writing, regardless of your, university affiliation, regardless of your discipline, these are very important for any researcher in the field. First, when you write something, please justify. Do not just, declare. Declare meaning this study use convenience sampling, but it will be justifying approach when you say why so. Maybe because, the respondent, the criteria you set was not easy to get using non-probability sampling. So please justify. Justify based on logic, not by emotion. Logic meaning if you say that I want to study halal this, phenomenon in maybe food market. Why? Because in food restaurant chain, halal issue is very important, and it can be actually, very much related to different religious different customers who are affiliated with different religion. But if you say that I want to study this halal food restaurant chain because I have the restaurant and my family run this, it's a very wrong answer. It's just by emotion, and nobody's going to buying it. So when you're justifying, first you have to justify. Second, when you justify, please justify by logic. Number third, make a conclusion. So when you are revising and reviewing a lot of information, so don't keep it like unconcluded. You also need to show your stand that okay, after reading all those things, what you understood or what is your point of view here. And also you need to see whether your writing flowing smoothly or it is actually not flowing smoothly. And definitely referencing style. If you write even for journal publications, different journal have their different requirement. Different university have different requirement. Different referencing bodies, they have different requirements. So please follow that. Others sometimes very annoying. From my students' perspective, I know they feel it's a very stupid thing, but actually it's a very important thing. Even any journal can just reject if you didn't follow their formatting style. They can return it to saying that, the authors didn't follow the formatting style. This formatting style includes referencing style. Well, I'm running shortage of time, but let's see one or two examples. So this example, we read very quickly. Consumer behavior is getting increasingly complex in order to deal with the new market environment, blah, blah, blah. The more you know about your existing or prospective consumers, the easier it would be for firms to take control of their marketing effectiveness. With this same, the study attempts to successfully profile young children. Okay, my question was, they didn't justify why young children are considered as young consumer or consumer behavior. Okay, they suddenly jump into that they want to study the young children, but they didn't explain why so. Why young children? Okay, as consumer behavior. Okay, so this is also, for example, this particular write-up, they are saying that OCB, whoever working on organization behavior, that organizational citizenship behavior, in short OCB, it has multiple school of thought. Some school of thought say it is actually unidimension, some say 2 dimensions, some say it has 5 dimensions, some says 8 dimensions. So at least there are 4 school of thought. So these people, they didn't conclude anything, they didn't explain anything, they started to say that it has 5 dimensions. So when you are actually writing one phenomenon that has controversies, that has a very rich literature or a lot of school of thought, and you are not sharing all those things and you're jumping to the conclusion it has 5 dimensions, and at the end they didn't say it even that whether they're following this 5 dimension or something else. So whenever you write something, you review something, you need to also briefly say that what is your stand here. So this one would be good writing if they have discussed at the end that they followed these 5 dimensions for their study. Okay, that shows that what you have done, what is your stand, what is your perception. Okay, so I'm not going to all here. So okay, now one very important thing just to share with you guys that okay, what to cite. Cite recent articles. Now there's a question, what do you mean by recent articles? So recent meaning there is a a little bit of argument, 3 to 5 years, but it is not more than 5 years. So who are more strict, they count 3 years. Who are more flexible, they count 5 years. So cite recent articles. Cite milestone and articles and gurus in the field. So of course you need to know who write more on that topic. We call them guru. And milestone articles are those are actually, even if it is old, doesn't matter, still we cite because of his contribution to the body of knowledge. Cite the pioneer articles. So when you cite just 5 years back, the recent articles, doesn't mean that you cannot cite pioneer articles. Definitely you can cite. You need to know origin. You also, but maybe not so vastly, but at least to some extent you should have your understanding. Like me, if you ask me, I'm marketing lecturer, so of course, loyalty I have to read, a very common phenomenon. So anyone asks me when consumer loyalty started, I can tell that it was started in 1960s. Can you imagine? No, 1940s. And even I can tell you who started with all those things at the moment. So if you are not actually aware of all those things, you are blind to me, and you don't know your craft well. So I'm not saying you have to read all past literature, but at least you know the basic. You should know the origin. You should know when it started, how they look when it started, the phenomenon. And then you can move to the recent articles. Cite, of course, from scholarly journal articles, and few things to remember in your chapter 1. Cite, of course, as much as you can recent literature. But when you're writing a literature review chapter, it can couple with, past, present, and in between. Okay. Another thing Dr. Mohsin asked me to share with you guys, when we read articles, review literature, so what are the tips I can give for new researchers? So now I'm going to share a few things. Okay, before I proceed, when you read article, there are 2 things you have to understand, you have to do: summarize and synthesize. 2 different things. Summary can be for 1 article. Synthesis cannot be for 1 article. So summary is a smart presentation of what you understand of reading 1 or 2 or 3 articles. Synthesis actually looking at the, the link, looking at the loopholes, looking at a greater picture, integrating understanding, So this is called synthesis, the higher level. So summary you can do every day for reading article, but synthesis, it takes time. After you read several articles, you have a bigger understanding, bigger picture, only then you can synthesize. It cannot be done overnight, all of a sudden, okay? It takes time to build your understanding about the phenomenon. Now, when you're reading, first thing you need to see the credibility. What do you mean by credibility? What are the author's credentials? Are they an expert in the field? Are they affiliated to a reputed organization? What is the date of publication? Is it sufficiently current or very, very backdated? If it is a book, are you looking at the latest edition? Is the publisher reputable? If it is a journal, has the content been peer reviewed? So if you go to the journal website, you will get all those information about that particular journal, okay? And who have the practice of reading and collecting the, downloading and reviewing, they already know, they're familiar with the publishers. Okay, this publisher is, maybe you have to spend sometimes first 3-4 months actively, then you will be very much familiar with all those things. So once you know this source is actually authentic, credential, then you have to see other thing. Is the writer addressing a scholarly audience? Does the author review the relevant literature? Does the author write from the objective viewpoint or subjective viewpoint? So is the research method sound? Is it primary, secondary materials? What is the relationship of this work to other materials on the same topic? Is the author's argument logically organized? If the author is writing from a practice-based perspective, what themes emerge and what conclusion can be drawn? Are there any significant question forming basis for further investigation? This is taken from actually one website. This is Emerald. So if you want, I can leave it in the chat box even, no problem at all. But for me, I want to make it more precise for all of you. Just look for a few questions when you're reading article. Who have studied this problem issue before? What they have found? What is still not known? What are the existing school of thought? Where do you study stands among these different schools? What method has been utilized? How this finding contribute to the body of knowledge? So before you read this any article, you can just have these questions beside you. When you're reading, try to see what are the answers you can get after reading this particular article. Okay, we read together one example how you can do that. Okay, so Nichols 1984 explained that achievement motivation is highly correlated with the performance. It is actually they're talking about achievement motivation. So just skip some sentence. Most of the work motivation related to psychology, education, development has focused on achievement motivation. Then Caffey et al. Found that achievement motivation is the effort of each individual to minimum maintain his or her maximum abilities, blah, blah, blah. Now, the question is, whether, what is this, what we know from here. So we know that the findings, you can see that from, they said that what other authors they have examined. Yes, it is, they are showing that they are talking about other studies and what other people have found. You can see all those things, but they didn't tell us what you do not know, right? They didn't talk about, is this the school of thought, or that's why we do not know where I or my school of thought belongs to. Another one, this paper examines female consumers' acceptance and engagement towards green cosmetics. So this is the objective. So when you read something, you need to know what is the objective or main purpose of this study. So that is the thing here you can understand. They also told us that what methodology they use. Data 9 is equal to 408. So this is actually, they use structural equation modeling. Definitely it is quantitative methodology. So you also know that, okay, they used structural modeling. That means it was a quantitative method, and their in sample size was 408. It is conducted in South Africa. We also know the finding because they're given us the finding, the result outcome of this paper. And we know that it is contributing to the practitioners, to the practices for the industry practitioners. So in this way, you also need to, whenever you read something, you can have your own papers and pencils, you can have your own mind map. So you can also try to understand that, okay, what is the methodology they use, what is the finding they found, what is the research objective, why they conducted this study, what is the research gap, is there any school of thought, if there's school of thought, what are those schools of thought, and then you can try to figure it out. In this all information, which one you think is useful for you and which place it belongs to, okay? And you also can think, after you read many articles, then you will be able to synthesize, and you can understand the loopholes, the gap, the deficiency in the literature as well. This is one very much critically and written a text that is also well synthesized, but this particular text has been written after reading plenty 200 500 articles. So doesn't mean you have to read 500 articles. It means that you read well to the extent you understand the craft and you feel confident. If you are working on a vast literature, a topic that has a vast literature, and you read only 20 articles, you will not have any confidence level, I'm telling you. So you have to understand that whether that level give you the confidence, whether when your examiners ask you a question or your supervisor asks you a question, whether you have that level of confidence to answer confidently that, yeah, I know what I'm doing. So this one, you can see that, it is written, although the loyalty phenomenon has been studied since the last 8 decades, little emphasis has been given on multi-brand loyalty. Jacob and Olson began to explore the notion during 1970s. As I said, you should know your pioneer when it, incepted or something, because somehow you have to demonstrate that ability that you know the basic. If you not needed to read everything, but you know the basic. Okay. Both of these studies were exploratory in nature and not meant to understand the specific antecedent of multi-brand loyalty. You see, they're criticizing simultaneously, the synthesizing and criticizing. So they said that it was exploratory in nature, and it was not specific to the antecedent of MBL. The focus of the former research was to highlight, then explaining each article what was their focus, okay? Then they're talking about what theory they used, and then they're talking about, however, not many studies have examined this construct. In a relatively recent study, Murray have examined the relevance of MBL. It is important to note that all these studies focus on physical product, ignoring the service aspect. Again, it is critically reviewing and also synthesizing. Then it is saying, in addition to this, it is necessary to understand the clear portion among SBL, sole brand loyalty, multi-brand loyalty switching. Hence, taking this gap into consideration, the present study tries to gain a deeper knowledge. So this is how a piece of writing that is actually well synthesized and critically written. And it will not come overnight, as I said. Once you read properly, once you understand your own topic well, Only then you can see the bigger picture. You'll be able to critical analyze. You'll be able to synthesize. As I said that you can use, you can read these books, Cooper, Hart, Ridley, Saunders et al., Wallace and Ray, and happens to be one book, my book. This is actually, you cannot get it in Amazon, unfortunately. And all other books you can buy online, and please feel free to read any books. Those all books are very, very important. It will give you a lot of understanding. For me, it is all the time advisable to read as many as you can. Okay, so this is my books, how it looks like, and some of today's discussion you will find again in the YouTube. That is also, invited talk by the Research Beast, so you can also get it there. And with that, thank you. And I already exceeded actually 1 hour of my time, so I now leave the floor for Dr. Mohsin.
My question is, how can we make sure the Gray literature is authentic? It was never published.
Okay, as I said, it depends on the discipline to discipline. First of all, thanks for the question. So for my discipline, we do not actually encourage students to use Gray literature much. We do not encourage in my discipline, but doesn't mean that your discipline also will discourage it. So you have to maybe consult with your lecturers or your supervisor. For my discipline, why we do not encourage? First of all, we have plenty of academic literature that is going through rigorous process. Again, when you're talking about newspaper cutting, this is not Gray literature, because you know what? Because it is already published and maybe reviewed by the editors, reviewed by the reviewers or something. So newspaper kind of thing is fine, because sometimes when you want to, let's say I want to talk about, for example, dark tourism. I'm talking about, the use of animals in the tourism sector, and I need data to provide the information that, okay, this is a bad practices and how much it is costing, devastating for the animals' welfare. So I have to get information from newspaper possibly, because they will give me latest facts and figures. It's okay. But Gray literature are maybe companies' internal data. Maybe this is about, unpublished thesis. So those kind of things, those do not consider as published materials, but you will get it online. So those are the things actually for my discipline is not encouraged. So in your discipline, better you talk to your lecturers and the supervisor.
I have one question. As you said that citation is one of the most important key components in our literature. But as you know that the COVID expanding and exploring and giving us so many research areas and opportunities to move on towards that direction and find some gaps and try to fill all those gaps. And we all do not have such kind of literature and previous studies to cite and suggest someone to claim our point. What are the way forwards to cite? What are the way forwards to move on that direction to explore the gaps, to try to fill all those gaps without available literatures and without citations? As we know that all the figures, facts are available in different websites, but there's no literature available on that topic. How we can pursue that topic to fill that gap with the help of research?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. If I understand correctly, you are trying to understand if you don't have proper literature support, how you are going to justify your research gap.
Yes.
So if this is your question, then actually, from my little understanding, you can do qualitative study, because qualitative study always gives us the opportunity to work on something that doesn't have much ground or much existing information. So qualitative study, mixed methodology, they are more flexible in nature in terms of citation or things, because those, methodology gives us the privilege to ponder or explore something that not many people have done before, or we do not know anything much before. However, I'm not so sure about your discipline, because I think you're from multimedia side. So in your discipline, I am not so sure whether this is a common thing that you have very much, lack of literature. I have no clue about that. So still what I believe that, when we try to establish the need of a study, we still need to have some citations or some preliminary discussion from the existing literature. Sometimes what happens, if you don't have exactly what you are doing, but if a similar thing, I give you an example. Let's say in marketing, customer satisfaction, we have plenty of study, but maybe if you're talking about customer delight, we do not have much study, but origin similar. So customer satisfaction, customer delight, maybe origin similar, but they are two different phenomena or two different constructs. So then when I'm writing on customer delight and I do not have much information from the existing, source of customer delight, then I can actually borrow the literature from similar study, that is customer satisfaction. And then I can say that this is the similar study, but we have lack of study on this particular phenomenon. So this is another way we can actually justify, like customer retention, customer loyalty, customer switching. So when customer switching, the debate of customer switching started later than customer loyalty. People written a lot about customer loyalty, customer, this kind of thing, retention. So then when people started to talk about switching, then we don't have much literature on switching. But then still, the authors or the writers, they're bringing the discussion from loyalty literature and saying that we know about loyalty and this is a similar phenomenon, just opposite of the loyalty. So it is something new that we want to ponder. So one way you can still discuss the related other phenomenon or relevant studies, and then you can pinpoint the gap. Or maybe you can also talk about the use of qualitative inquiry.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor, for such a nice explanation. Since we have limited time, so one last question from one of my brilliant students, Shanawar Rafiq. Shanawar, please go ahead.
Sir, thank you so much, sir. My question, I have two parts. First part is about if there is abundance of literature available about the topic or the field, of 50 articles and 60 articles, how much should we include in the literature? This is the first part of my question. The second part is, if there is not much literature available about that topic, then what should we do and what is the way out?
Thank you very much. I think second part I already answered. If you don't have much literature, what you can do, you can talk about related literature. You can use the theory that can fit in your, that can justify your phenomenon, or you can do qualitative study or mixed methodology. The first part of the question, when you have plenty, just opposite of the second question, that when you have plenty of or huge literature. So actually it also depends, I will say, for certain discipline, if your phenomenon is actually matured topic, saturated area, you must show that kind of, your expertise that you read thoroughly. So I have to mention that your discipline is something new to me. So I have no idea how your discipline, you work. So maybe you can read some of your, articles that is in your area, or you can discuss with your supervisors or your lecturers who are teaching methodology courses or the published articles. But in general, when you are working on a topic that is saturated or mature topic, you have to show that kind of expertise, that okay, you search the research well. So what you can do, you can try to read some from the pioneer article, some from the in between, and some at the very latest. Of course, we cannot read everything, it's not possible, but you should read to the extent you have some confidence level. So if you are you would consider yourself, you are in front of your examiners during your proposal defense, and when your examiner asking some questions, whether you're confident enough to answer it or not. That's very important, because if you read, let's say you have plenty, maybe 100 years of, your published articles, you read only for maybe 10 years you covered. So whether you are confident to answer, if your examiner asks a certain question, whether you will be shaking, your leg or your hand that, no, I didn't read that, I didn't cover that. So the key is here, the moment you feel like confident and I have sufficient understanding on the topic, I think that's very important. But I cannot say there's no magic number. Thank you very much to all of you and Dr. Mohsin. So can I just leave the session now?
Yes, you can. Thank you so much.
Okay, it was a wonderful experience to meet all of you, though virtually. So I wish you all of you good luck, and thank you very much to Dr. Mohsin again. So see you all. Bye. Assalamualaikum.